everybody. If you clicked on this video, then you are interested in lending for home ownership. And I'm super, super excited to have the beautiful Candace here. She is a lender, and we're going to talk about lending for W-2 versus 1099. Candace, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here.
Excited to be here.
So you're here based off of an Instagram post.
Yes.
An Instagram post that, you know, in my small micro influencer world,
Right. No way.
So the post was, I want to read it verbatim. For those of you who didn't catch it, I'm going to insert it here. But the post, I read this tweet that I saw.
Yes.
And it said, yes, lenders prefer a W-2 employee that makes $50,000 over a 1099 entrepreneur that makes $500,000. And I just posted it, and I wanted to get people's opinions, say like, okay, is that real? Is that fair? How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
So I know home ownership has been a hot topic in the last 2 years,
Absolutely.
right? Just
Absolutely.
through the roof. So tell us, how did you get into lending?
Sure. So I've always had a background in either sales or financials for organizations. And so I thought about it, you know, how do I take the same skill set, go from helping organizations to become more efficient in their earnings and things of that nature to doing it for individuals like myself, to be honest with you as well. And so it's an education process as well, in addition to helping people acquire wealth through real estate, but teaching them the financial principles of how to finance this asset that you're gaining, that you're investing in, and you get the whole asset without even investing the full cost upfront.
Okay.
I mean, just if you think about that for a second, it just kind of gives you that realization that this is bigger than what's in front of me. A mortgage financing vehicle is, or tool, I should say, is definitely like the way to go, but you got to have the right people with you.
Okay, let's kind of take a step back for a moment.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the wealth building piece, because you mentioned using it to build wealth.
Yes.
So I think the stats here in America are millennials in particular, which is probably who's watching this, is behind in homeownership compared to baby boomers.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I think part of it is that we don't understand the process. What's your take on why you think millennials are behind baby boomers in terms of homeownership?
I think it's a couple of things. So we live in a very socially engaged world. And so it's all about connectivity. So I think the live, work, play communities have definitely impacted the desire to be ultimately connected in my personal life 100% of the time, as compared to like a single family residence when it's just you and whoever resides in your household or in your neighborhood, right? So I think that has influenced more renting than home ownership.
That makes sense.
But I challenge that a little bit with like, nobody's acquiring wealth except for the apartment developers.
True.
In that respect. So
yeah,
I'm probably going to
get some flack for that. I didn't really think about that though, because I think back to the time when I was actually in college. Because I feel like this whole thing really starts with people in college.
Yeah, sure.
Because think about how when I started out, I was in like the nasty dorm with like another person in my room.
Rite of passage.
And then, exactly. And then you get to like elevate. But instead of elevating to like an apartment, like the standard apartment, I moved to the off-campus housing where we had granite countertops and like everything was nice. We had like a big comfy couch, cable, like your own room, your own bathroom. And so I remember having this conversation with some coworkers a few years ago. That really sets you up for failure, because then once you get out into the real world and you realize like, I couldn't afford a home that looks like this. Like I can't afford for my first job, the granite countertops and the view and all of the things. So I think you're right. Like there is some diminishment of homeownership in that process of being like, oh, I'm so used to this luxury.
Absolutely.
Like, how could I take that step back? So I agree with that. That's a good point I didn't think about.
And homeownership costs. Like, let's be real. We're talking about getting in the door through mortgage programs and things of that nature. But there's a lot of upkeep. There's responsibility. There's maintenance. There's like, you own it, you fix it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of costs associated. So that could be another factor too. I walk in the door, a new apartment, live, work, play community. I have all the amenities at my fingertips and the finest luxuries within. And if something breaks, I'm picking up the phone.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. So how do we have this conversation and educate people on this transition from renting to owning for that wealth building tool?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, and whenever I'm working with a buyer who is generally a first-time home buyer or someone who has owned previously, transitioned back into the rental space, right? Could have been a relocation, could have been proximity. They wanted to be closer to a major metro area. However, I'm talking to them about the cost of renting versus owning, but we're looking at it over a span of time. Apples to apples, it's never going to make sense when you're looking at it 1 year to 1 year. But if I look at the cost of renting over the course of 3 to 5 years as compared to home ownership, and just looking at the appreciation, look at our market right now, how homes are appreciating. You would never be able to gain that in a rental scenario. So we start with that kind of comparison up front.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I think overall, when we're talking about homeownership for people who look like us, I think it's even more important that we have that conversation.
True.
Because I think the numbers look like 65% of all Americans own their home.
Yeah.
But when you look at people who look like us, it's 43%.
Yeah.
So we're really behind. But I also think that it's really interesting to me, so we need to continue that conversation. But I also think that it's really interesting to me that 65% of Americans own their home, and 64% of those 65 actually have a mortgage.
Yes. So what does that mean? Everybody's financing.
Everybody's financing their home.
Yes. So, and why would you not? When we talk about home ownership, we talk about a span of time. So we're looking at the long term. We could look at a 10, a 15, a 20, but generally people do a 30-year term, right? But I don't know very many people who stay in their house the full 30-year period.
Makes sense.
Right? So when you look at it from that perspective, you could purchase, if you had the resources and assets up front, 100% of the value of the home. But I guess my question is, why would you?
So think about it. I think the average home price in Atlanta is like $350 right now.
Yeah, or $394, depending on like where you are in the metro area.
So like, who has that just sitting around to like purchase a home? Or who saved all that time to get $350,000?
Exactly.
That's a long time of saving.
Exactly. It's a long time of savings, or it's coming through the form of an inheritance, or it's coming through multiple sources of savings, parent contributions, gifts, things, and gifts are real. So I'm not going to knock that. I've seen people get $50,000 in gifts at the closing table. So gifts are real. But yeah, that would be the only way that you would have that type of lump sum cash, or you're trading off retirement for home ownership, right? So all of my savings from a retirement perspective to home ownership. Financing makes sense. Financing makes sense when you understand the long-term goal. What purpose does this home serve for me? So understanding that first part, and then understanding the programs that are available. We talk about fixed rate mortgages, we talk about adjustable rate mortgages. Like, there's so many different types of mortgages, but they all fit a specific strategy or a scenario. So you got to know, like, what does this home serve for me? Is this my forever home? Probably not. Is this a temporary home? Okay. Do I want this home to buy right now and then turn around and sell it later because it's an appreciation tool for me? Or do I want to keep it as an investment property and then have that rental income come? Know what the purpose is.
Right. And I think it's cool to know that you can always pivot. Right. So you can move into a house and think you're going to live there for a while, and then you pivot and you rent it out and you go somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think there's a lot more flexibility, especially in this world of like Airbnb and being able to find renters so easily online as opposed to before we had online, that I feel like homeownership shouldn't be quite as scary.
Absolutely.
So I want to demystify that for a lot of, I think, women mostly, because I think women, especially as single women, we struggle with the thought of like owning a single family home, where it's just that by itself and you've got to take care of all the things and mow the grass, and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I know for me early on, I opted for a condo because I was like, okay, single woman, like I'm going for safety, I'm going for ease.
Sure.
And so I was like, well, I can buy a condo and still be building wealth and equity.
Absolutely.
But have the safety and security and like kind of some of the things that you get from an apartment.
Sure.
So would you kind of recommend like people who want to ease into home ownership, maybe look at using a condo or a townhouse before they jump into single family home ownership?
I think two factors: price for sure. So what is the amount that you want to spend? Because there is a big difference, right? So there are condos that are in the $200,000 range that are available that may be more accessible versus a single family home that could be in a $300,000 range. I think preference is another factor. Do you want somebody attached to you, or do you want to be in a detached situation? Like,
True.
that's a factor as well. And that's more than a preference of anything. And then I think the other thing is the purpose. Like you said, what's my strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Am I getting into an area, into a home that I know is going to appreciate and that I can hold and go buy something else, or take the equity out of that and go purchase what I want from a single family perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I purchasing for safety, security? I mean, it just depends.
Mm-hmm.
It depends.
Yeah.
I won't say one versus the other, because I see it every single day. I see families living in townhomes, and then I see single individuals living in, 4,000 square foot single family homes. And you're like, whatever, whatever works for you.
Yeah, I'm in that same camp of like, whatever works for you, but get a house, okay? Like, whatever works for you, but you need something.
You need to own it. It needs to be real estate.
You do. Okay, so let's talk about the actual like nuts and bolts of owning a home, right? Of getting the lending, going through the lending process.
Yeah. So when we talk about the start of the lending process, it is all about qualification. So any lender that you're working with, you should be having a very open, honest conversation regarding your financials. And I tell people that I work with all the time, other than your partner, like, this is probably the most intimate relationship you're about to have.
Yes, talking about your money is super intimate.
It's super intimate. And I'm reviewing and asking questions about, and it's not to expose, and it's not to challenge or condemn, but it is to understand. Because as my job is, I have to package you. If that makes sense?
No, it makes sense, because we didn't even get to like the initial process. So when you decide that you want to buy a home, right, before an agent is really going to work with you, they're going to say, okay, where's your pre-qualification letter? Yeah. Right. So there's a pre-approval, which is like what you get in the mail from like credit card companies. Where like, hey, you've been pre-approved for this, but they still want you to go ahead and apply for the process.
Exactly.
So your agent wants you to have that pre-qualification letter to say like, hey, you're qualified for X amount of dollars.
Absolutely.
Right? So then you've got to get really intimate with them of like, hey, I need to know so I can really pre-qualify you and give you a legitimate number. Because I think going on Zillow is cool, and like using those calculators is cool. That's where I tell a lot of people to start. I'm like, hey, just start right there before you even go talk to somebody. Just say like, hey, okay, this is my debt. This is kind of what I qualify for. But then you have to talk with the lender to get that actual pre-qualification letter.
The real.
Yeah.
Because I mean, think about this market. These realtors are busy. And I love my realtors who say, hey, this person needs to talk to you before I will show them house number one. And I appreciate that, because we all aspire to a little bit more than sometimes we can actually afford. And when I talk about from affordability perspective, there's a humble moment too, where you have to back up and say, oh, well, I wanted that $1 billion home, but, well, my finances say it might be like 500,000.
Be in the 4 range, okay? But I look at that $80 million house in Bel Air all the time.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it has to make sense. So where do we start? We start with pre-qualification. And we pre-qualify you based on a couple of factors. Number one is going to be your credit. We're going to ask to run the credit report. We're going to ask you for authorization, because we need to understand your credit history, how many trade lines you've had, but then also where your money and how your money is being allocated and spent, right? Credit is meant to be used, but not needed. So that's principle number one, looking at credit. The second thing we're going to look at is your current income. So current income could be in the form of a W-2, or it could be self-employed. I mean, you think about...
Where it gets spicy.
This is where it gets...
This is where it gets spicy, okay?
There are a lot of opinions about it, but W-2, I work for someone else. They issue me a W-2. They withhold my taxes for me. 1099 or self-employed or S corp or, whatever it is, how your business is defined, you have a lot more flexibility in how your business is represented financially.
Mm-hmm.
Which means you also have a different responsibility of showing how you personally earn aside from your business. Because you and your business are two separate entities, but when I look at them financially to qualify you, I need to look at them together and they both need to be healthy. They both have to be healthy.
So your personal and your business both have to be healthy if you're on the 1099.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so the question everybody's been waiting for. Do lenders prefer W-2 over 1099?
Lenders do not have a preference of W-2 over 1099. Lenders prefer qualified buyers. Lenders will tell you that W-2 is easier. Why? Because it's one number.
It's like a shorter list of things on the needed.
It's one number. Yes, absolutely.
It's like, I need your tax returns, I need your pay stub, I need your credit.
And sometimes I don't even need your tax returns, right? Because whether you know it or not, we're going to verify with the IRS via the transcript anyway.
I know.
Right?
I know. It's so annoying to me. I'm like,
anyway, we're going to get it that way. But when you think about the W-2, we're really just looking at box one. That's the number. That's how much have you earned over the given year? And then depending on other factors, we're either averaging 12 to 24 months to get your monthly income to offset your liabilities that we have.
Which is why, so you jump to box one, which is why sometimes it can be misleading when when you qualify, let's say you qualify for that $1 million home.
Sure.
Then you really look at your money and you're like, dang, I really can't afford that $1 million home.
Yes.
Because the number is based off of box one, which is your gross income.
Which is your gross income, right? So lenders look at your gross income. We do not look at your net income as we are calculating. That is your responsibility as you're going through the process, all right? We're qualifying you based on earnings, not necessarily, the taxes that you pay, the medical deductions that come out, the financial or retirement deductions that those all deduct from, but we're looking at it from a gross perspective. So that's W-2.
And that's how people get house for.
That is how people get house for.
They buy that $1 million home because they qualified for it, but they can't really afford it.
And I always say, you are likely to be qualified for more than you can truly afford to pay on a monthly basis. So it's prudent to be able to understand upfront, I don't want to pay more than X. Because with your net and your other responsibilities, what that net amount is truly going to be. What that is going to be. So for me, I say, what is your bottom line of how much you want to pay? And that's the number you should back into. That's the number that you should hold your realtor to.
The monthly amount, you want to calculate what you want to pay monthly?
Monthly.
Yeah.
How much I want to pay. So if I only want to pay no more than $2,000 a month, which is kind of rare in this market, right? By the time you escrow and things of that nature, but $2,000 a month, then that everything that we're calculating is backing into that monthly payment not exceeding $2,000 because you make or net $5,000 a month. And you don't want to be house poor. And you don't want to also reduce your lifestyle as well.
Yeah, exactly. And things that can help offset that number or help you to manipulate that is like a down payment.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you're able to put more of a down payment down, then hopefully you can get that bigger house that you qualified for down to a lower payment.
Yes.
So you can kind of manipulate the numbers.
Absolutely. You can. There are down payments that you can take into consideration. There are down payment assistance programs as well. There's 100% financing, which I just posted the other day, and people are like, tell me more. Where does that come from? I've never seen 100% financing in this market, but there are. There are different ways that you can avoid the down payment or put down a down payment to offset as well. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk more about those options.
Yeah.
So people hear things like FHA, conventional, 10% down, 3% down. Let's kind of talk about those options that they have when it comes to lending. So step one, go on Zillow, kind of get an idea, right? Use a calculator of an idea.
Yeah.
Then you want to actually go get pre-qualified with a lender, which I'll put Candace's information below so that you guys can contact her. You work only in Georgia?
No.
All 50 states?
So from Virginia down to Florida, Alabama up to Tennessee. So think the entire Southeast.
Entire Southeast. All right, cool. So I'll put her information below so you guys can use her. So then get pre-qualified, and then and then the next step is to decide, like, do I want to go FHA? Do I want to do conventional? Right? Like, how much do I want to put down? Is that what's next?
It is. And the lender should really be driving that process at that point, because by now I know what you're trying to achieve. I know what your income looks like. I know what liabilities or responsibilities you have in addition to those things that are reported on your credit report. Like, I know you at that point financially. And so from there, it's my job to make recommendations based on the programs that I know that are available. So you'll have like your qualified mortgages, which you'll hear referred to in the market as like government-backed or QM. Those are qualified mortgages. Those are your FHA and your conventional loans. So FHA is always going to require 3.5% down, but there is a 1.75% funding fee. So when you think about it, FHA is more than just 3.5%. Keep that in mind. Conventional, on the other side, minimum down is 5%. But generally, you avoid mortgage insurance when you put down at least 20%. So then you'll see people, kind of leaning more towards the 20% if they have the savings or assets in place. So those are your government-backed qualified mortgages. But then there are a ton of other non-QM portfolio products that sit on the market that allow you to do some of the very same thing. This is where your adjusted rate mortgages come into play. This is where your portfolio or select loans come into play. Bank statement loans, if you've heard of those, asset loans, asset only. There are a lot of different avenues, but your lender should really be driving that process and making the recommendation based on what they know you're trying to achieve and the relationship you built. Like, this is has to be a very trusting relationship too, right? Because some information is posted, some information is not posted. So you kind of have to have your lender drive that process for you.
Got it.
They know the guidelines, they know the ratios, they know the reserve requirements and things of that nature as well. You won't necessarily find all that online.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So let's get into like 1099 a little bit more, because we got a lot of comments on there, people who are like, oh, it is not fair, like they do not like us, like there's so many more requirements, like, can you kind of speak to that a little bit more and help demystify that for people? Yeah, because for 1099, or let's just call it self-employed borrowers, because there are different ways that they can be classified. So for 1099 or self-employed borrowers, it is a little bit more work because it's paperwork intensive. And when I say paperwork intensive, I mean that now we're getting heavy into documentation. I'm not just taking the word of an employer who's an established employer who's presenting that information directly to the IRS. I'm now working with an individual who is the owner of that organization who is then reporting their own information to the IRS and has the ability to manipulate the data. So people have been saying, they were like, oh, well, I can just W-2 myself from my job, and then if they'll back, don't have to worry about that. No. No, because you and the business are separate. There's the person and then there's the organization. But when you are also the owner of that organization, that is also part of who you are. I know it sounds crazy, but there are two aspects to it. So yes, you can W-2 yourself from within your self-employed business. Sure, absolutely. Not as an LLC, but sure.
True.
Just so y'all know, you can't do that.
True. So yes, you can do that. But then at the same time, that W-2 or that income comes back into the calculation as it relates to the business and the health of the business as well. So now we're looking at the profitability. Well, let's start with the gross earnings of the business, number one. We're starting with the gross earnings of the business. Then we're moving into what are the things or write-offs that you have identified and calculated during the tax process. I can't tell you how many business returns I see that have written off everything. And they're like, well, I don't want to pay taxes. But you also don't want to qualify for a home either, because there's no money to use as far as sustainability to repay the debt. And we're talking about a 30-year term debt. So number one, paperwork. Financial documents, P&L statements, critical. Like, being able to file tax returns consistently every single year, critical. Having an accountant or some financial planner or something of that nature to be able to guide you in the process, critical. Like those are all of the things that we start to look at in order to define from a 1099 perspective or self-employed borrower perspective, how do you qualify? What's your personal, and then what's the health of the business? So that's where we start. From there, we're then looking at certain elements of the tax return in order to define what can be pulled back in. So you've written off a ton of things, and that's fine to an extent. You've written off a ton of things, but then what can I pull back? So depreciation, I can pull back in. I can pull back in mileage. I can pull back in meals, entertainment expenses, the use of a home as part of your business. I can pull back in the appreciation over the time period as well. Depletion, if I'm using any natural resources. Those things all add back to the calculation. Even though they are business expenses, they say, hey, in order for my business to thrive and be sustained, we had to spend in these categories. So they add back to the earnings.
Got it.
If that makes sense. Okay. So those are the things that we look for from a 1099 perspective to assist the income component. But when you write everything off to avoid taxes, I have nothing to pull from.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, there's a couple drawbacks when you write everything off, right? Like it's cool, you get to avoid taxes, but also I realized in my years of financial planning that a lot of people get to Social Security age and they'll be like, why is my Social Security $400 per month when the average is like $1,300 and I was expecting to get close to $2,000? Like, why am I only getting $300?
Yeah.
Well, because you were a business owner and you wrote everything off your entire life, and so you never really paid into SSI, and so now you don't get any Social Security.
Sure.
So it works the same with lending, is what I'm hearing. It's like if you write everything off, then we can't say that you have any money and you could afford this home.
Yeah, and the business is not thriving either. Remember, it's the sustainability over time that we're looking for. It is, what has this person earned historically? But what can we anticipate that they will continue to earn, and at what rate of earnings going forward? Okay. And that is a huge factor from an underwriting perspective. Their primary job is to look for risk associated with with default. I can't even put any other default.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially after 2008.
Exactly. So we won't even get into that. Like the dollar down and all of those things. I mean, there's so many different ways that we have to package the file in order for that person to be represented in the best light. Tell a story, even though you will never talk to the person who's making a decision. So everything on paper has to speak for you in the most favorable manner. And that's, part of my job and your job too, as the borrower, to make sure I understand. I've had tax returns that didn't match, you're like, come on, I've had scenarios like that. Income that I was hourly and I was able to earn overtime and all of these other components. And I didn't tell you that I was now salaried. I don't get any of those things. So then going back to the table and having to verify those things at the end. I mean, those are things that can significantly impact your ability to purchase.
Okay, so there's a piece that you just said that I want to pull out, and you were talking about the verification process there with like the tax returns.
Yes.
So I'm just going to say it. I mean, Atlanta is known for scamming, okay? There's a lot of scamming that happens all over the world, right? But it's really high here in Georgia. And we're like, I think, number 3 in the nation in terms of like fraud.
Yeah.
So identity theft and all of the above. And there's like a whole reasoning behind that. It gets like super, super long in the process. And the reality is you're dealing with that right now. Like you're dealing with people who scam. So what does that look like in terms of the qualification process and like finding those inconsistencies?
Yeah, so definitely lots of questioning through the process. And sometimes you're asking and answering the same question multiple times because we're listening for indications of intent. And so when I say intent, I'm looking for, you told me you were purchasing this home as your primary residence, but during the course of the conversation, I heard you mention that your sister and her family will reside in the home and you'll travel back and forth. Those two.
You switched up. You told on yourself, really.
And so many times we tell on ourselves, right? So many times we tell on ourselves.
And like, let's be honest, we're not talking about this to try to teach y'all how to get around, but
no.
It's just a reality of.
Absolutely. It happens.
Be straightforward.
It happens. Be straightforward because it's going to come back. And I think that's just the overall rule of thumb. You're going to be asked the same question multiple times in different ways in order to really understand the intent and to listen for those unfortunate opportunities where, fraud is occurring. Some of the other things we do we do tons of verification. So once that application is submitted, we're then taking that information based on what we've received, in addition to all of the verification. So credits of verification that occurs. We also do tax transfer verification as well. So we're looking at earnings as compared to, if you're W-2, we're looking at earnings based on the W-2 information that was reported and in comparison to what the IRS received in that same category, or if you are self-employed, same respect. All of those numbers have to line up. We do verifications of employment. So there is very few opportunities where you will have your cousin answer the phone and say that you've been on the job for 5 years and you've been there 5 months. So there are employment verifications, tax verifications, verifications of deposit as well. So that's why we want your bank statement, because now we're looking at where is your money coming from. I don't care where your money is going, because I can't tell you how many swipes I see for fast food. We don't look at where your swipes are going and withdrawals. We care about where it's coming from. So verification of deposit. Is it coming from an employer? Is it coming from your business, since you define that as well? What other sources? And then sometimes we actually source those deposits as well. So show me proof of. You say this is a gift towards your closing. Who is this person gifting you? What's the relationship? And does this take their money? All of their money? Are they going to be at a zero balance by gifting to you? That's another
Wait. Talk about the gifting part, because I've advised plenty of people who have gotten gifts, right? That's part of generational wealth. Being able to gift your family, children, whomever, $50,000 down payment.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize y'all checked the gift on the back end.
Absolutely. You're verifying the source of that gift. And at times we will ask for either a statement from that individual attesting to giving the gift and verifying that it does not eliminate all of their savings or their ability to sustain their own life in order to pay. Or times we ask for their bank statements too, to show where the source of that gift came from. Was it sitting in a savings? Did they pull from their retirement? Was it in an estate plan? Where is this money coming from? And we do that because one of the first indicators of mortgage fraud are large cash sums. So if you can't source it, then you can't use it.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people that come to the closing table, oh, you need $29,000 to close. I'm bringing all cash. Well, you're not going to close. You're not going to close because nobody's taking cash at the table that has not been sourced. So yeah, that's another indicator. Cash flow, definitely paying attention to as well. But there are tons of verifications that occur during the process.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So with the bank statement loans in particular, those have been super, super hot lately. I think it's because we've moved into this gig economy and a lot of people realize they can make a lot more money online.
Sure.
And we've had the Great Resignation and people have just decided to leave their jobs. So now it's okay, I want to buy a house also.
Right.
Or I want to move and I want to get a new mortgage.
Sure.
So bank statement loans have gotten really, really popular.
Bank statement loans are a great vehicle for the right buyer or for the right borrower, I should say, because bank statement loans in essence are an asset loan. It's looking at the amount of money that you have personally sitting. And so we're then comparing, does this person, and one of the qualifiers is, does this person have 24 months worth of principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, so PITI, sitting in reserves in order to qualify for this loan. So 24 months of your mortgage note and escrows and everything else just sitting there. Does this person have it? And if they do, does it deplete their account by satisfying that requirement? And oftentimes people say, well, I'll give you my bank, my bank checking or my bank savings account or whatever it is. We're talking about personal assets at this point. So this is not the business itself purchasing the home. This is the individual purchasing the home and how much cash flow they have sitting as well.
Okay, so not your personal, your business statements, but your personal.
Your personal, right.
Okay.
This is where your personal is coming into play. So it's definitely, it is for the qualified buyer who has heavy cash reserves. And I know we just talked about cash, so somebody's going to say like, but you just said cash was, but I mean cash from the perspective of assets sitting and verifiable assets through either, and I use inheritance because actually there are a lot of people that do receive money, upon someone else's death, and significant amounts of money as well. Or those who have had accidents, unfortunately, insurance payouts that are occurring, things of that nature. So there are individuals that have huge amounts sitting in personal assets that we can use to verify as well.
So generational wealth is a real thing.
It very much is.
Very much.
And should be a goal.
Should be a goal.
Should be a goal.
Y'all hear that?
Should be a goal. Yeah.
Post your goals below for generational wealth, okay? So we're kind of getting to the end of the interview. Yeah. I think we dropped some really good information. If this was helpful for you guys, let us know in the comments. You have Candace's information there so you can connect with her. Also, what's like the last thing you would want to leave people with?
I think one of the biggest things is home ownership is achievable. It is not difficult. It does require discipline financially. And reach out, ask questions, do your research online. I mean, there's tons of information online, but then have a conversation with a qualified lender like myself to verify and to really understand how does this financial mortgage, financial vehicle work for me in the scenario that I'm trying to achieve. And I think if you do that, then homeownership is achievable for everyone. And that's how we get generational wealth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
The numbers are 90% of millionaires got there through real estate.
Absolutely. I purchased and sold no less than 7 homes. I just sold one in Florida. I think we only went there maybe 2 to 3 times a year, but I use it as an investment property. And for others to be able to come and enjoy the beach and all of those things. Kept it for 4 years and grossed over $200,000.
Wow.
I don't know another asset or investment that I could have made that would have yielded the same returns. And then you turn around and you do it again. So we purchased another home. Like you just continue to do that in a way that it helps. My son's graduating this year. That is my financial plan to pay for his college.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's how you do it.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
So,
I love
and then you teach the kids and then they do it going forward. So, but I would say that, yeah, achievable for sure. Does not have to be difficult. And ask questions. Yeah. Ask tons of questions to the point that you understand and you know how to use it effectively.
Ask questions and then get your stuff in order.
Get your money right.
Get your stuff in order. If you have a business, hiring a bookkeeper or CPA is going to be one of the best investments that you make to help keep you accountable, keep everything clear for you. That way, when you get to the lending table, is that a thing? The lending table?
It is.
The lending Zoom, then you can have those conversations and have everything in order to make the process seamless.
Absolutely.
Because we said that, it's not fair that lenders prefer W-2 over self-employed. And it's not necessarily that they do. It's that, as a W-2 person, you probably have the things in order that you need to have in order because you're not also in charge of the business.
Sure.
So have the things in order and your process will go smooth as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Documentation is key.
Well, thanks so much for coming, Candace. I hope this was helpful for you guys and we'll see you soon.